I think the question you're asking, and it's a really important one, is while we're asking Americans to reconsider what they're eating, are we actually asking Americans, especially those who are living on the margins, are we asking them to spend more on their diet? And the answer to that is no. We've run over 1,000 simulations. It can cost around $3 a meal for a piece of chicken, a piece of broccoli, corn tortilla, and one other thing. And so there is a way to do this that actually will save the average American consumer money.
You've done the analysis on that, because that's one of the criticisms I heard from some nutrition folks that said, like with the event you mentioned, all the protein, saying, all right, well, steak obviously it's expensive. So are you asking people to spend more money with these new dietary guidelines than in the past? Do you say no?
That's right. And the answer to that is absolutely no. Now, there are, as most things are coming down, there are a few outliers. Beef has been one of them, but ground beef is coming down. But here's...
Okay. I am coming on screen with this image on purpose. That was Secretary Brooke Rollins, Agricultural Secretary, on this week. If you guys remember, obviously we've all been making fun of the fact that a piece of chicken, a piece of broccoli, a corn tortilla, and something else, which I'm so excited about. I'm sure you've seen all the different memes of the something else that we are talking about, right? There's always something else. And the something else could be, my theory is it's a Skittle from between the couch cushions. Now, look, there's a lot of news going on right now. Obviously, Minnesota, our friends in the network are covering all that. There's so much going on, but I wanted to go back to two topics that came out this week in the last 2 weeks that are really important still. So welcome to Friday night. But here, what you're looking at right now on the screen next to me is Missouri, my home state. And that green and yellow is what is called a food desert. And I won't go too deep into data, but a food desert is where people live more than 1 to 10 miles in rural areas from the nearest source of healthy food, perhaps a grocery store or whatever, a restaurant, but a place they can get healthy food. Okay. That's my home state of Missouri. Do you see all that green and yellow? Those are food deserts. And I want you to think about that as we listen to Secretary Rollins talk about how people are being unreasonable about, this new dietary guideline. Now, why are people stressed about dietary guidelines that she's saying? This is their attack on, this is the latest thing that Trump's trying to do, to say they're attacking affordability. The Secretary of Agriculture is running simulations, not talking to real people, but simulations, it's probably grok, about how we could save so much money. You could have a meal for $3. That's a $3 meal, folks. And all you got to do is get healthy food. Let's hear what else she had to say about it this week.
Done a wonderful job in terms of communicating how to do this and in a healthy way. But look, Secretary, you're getting heat all over social media for saying that you can eat healthy for $3. And some people go, how am I supposed to get a piece of chicken for under $3? You're trying to make this affordable as well. But sometimes eating healthy is not so affordable, right?
Well, it is interesting, the pushback. I think the pushback is probably because the left, the Democrats don't have much more to say other than that. But, chicken, poultry, vegetables, fruits, when you eat healthy, it actually is less expensive in many ways, depending on what you choose, less expensive than if you buy a fast food meal or if you eat a bag of Doritos or chips and have an energy drink. And that's really what we're trying to focus on here. And of course, the back end and the health benefits of all of it is really incredible. So we'll be putting more information out on that today. You'll see we've got hundreds of simulations that show that and different ways to put it together.
Simulations, hundreds of simulations. Now, okay, remember that image? Okay. The fact is, millions and millions and millions of Americans don't have other choices. They don't have healthy choices. That's the very addition, the idea of a food desert, is they don't actually have health choices. For millions of Americans, even those in urban areas, the cheapest thing they can feed their kids when they're hungry is a no-kidding bag of chips. And I don't know what universe this lady lives in. Actually, we do know what universe this lady lives in, because this was her a couple of weeks ago while we were worried about the stuff we're going to talk about for the rest of the show. This is Secretary Rollins' big idea, you guys. Remember, this is an affordability crisis for people who can't afford their food right now.
Part of the solution, more small farms, because when avian flu hits and you have these giant industrial farms, And these chickens, which I don't think the eggs are as good anyway, is part of it just investing in smaller farms, encouraging that.
I think the silver lining in all of this is how do we, in our backyards, we've got chickens in our backyard. How do we solve for something like this? And people are sort of looking around thinking, wow, well, maybe I could get a chicken in my backyard. And it's awesome. I agree with you.
Wow, maybe I get a chicken in my backyard. Where the F does this lady live? Okay. I mean, you guys, this is something I say a lot. You've seen it in the show for years, is these people are completely out of touch with the lives of the people they're supposed to represent. Right? Okay. Look, I live in a nice subdivision. I've got family members living in an apartment. I don't know. Do you guys ever drive around? This is crazy. I know a lot of you guys don't leave your homes. You probably don't travel around much, but do you ever drive around your town? You see those big giant buildings and they've got windows and balconies. And for some reason, a bunch of cars parked around them. They call them apartment buildings. And, a lot of people live in apartments and they can't have backyard chickens. A few years ago, I was in the city, New York City. You probably never heard of it. And in New York City, most people live in these really tall buildings without backyards. And I don't know if it'll be frowned upon if you have freaking chickens in your apartment. The fact is, these people are scrambling because they have got no idea what the hell they're doing right now. They're making things up to try and make believe they're tackling the affordability crisis, because that's why she's doing this week. Is Trump's decided affordability is an issue after millions of us have been talking about the fact that food's never been higher. It just came out this week that December food prices spiked higher than at any time since December of 2022, right after the pandemic, as food supplies had crashed. Okay, but there is no food supply crash. There's just bad policy and bad management and a Republican doormat Congress that can't be bothered to do any kind of oversight because they're too busy caping and covering and protecting the Trump administration from the foolish mistakes they're making. And I want you to go back to this picture over and over in your mind of my home state and your home state. By the way, this is from the internet. It's called the Food Desert Atlas. You can Google it, Food Desert Atlas, and they've calculated this number based on, there's different levels. For example, green is 1 to 10 miles, yellow is, and then finally red is you have to get a car to go there. This is where millions of Americans live. Okay. And millions of Americans live in places where they can't have backyard chickens and they can't walk to a store that has healthy food. And they sure as hell aren't going to get chicken, a piece of broccoli, and a corn tortilla for $3 freaking, no matter how many simulations this idiot person runs. The goal here is eventually, look, they're talking about dietary guidelines right now, but you and I know the real goal here. The real goal here is they've cut SNAP benefits for millions of Americans. They've cut nutrition assistance for millions of Americans. They're going to cut it down even more because now she's got a simulation that shows they only need $9 a day or less. Okay. That's the real goal here, folks. They're going to cut nutrition assistance because this lunatic thinks you can eat a piece of chicken, a piece of broccoli, a corn tortilla, and something else and have a healthy meal. That's what they think. And I assure you, Brooke Rollins has never had such a meal in her life. So let's talk about this disconnect between the governed and the governing, okay? And the governing are out of touch with reality. And they're throwing so much shit at us you can't even see straight. So as we speak, of course, there's fighting going on in Minneapolis. They actually have more federal agents in Minneapolis, St. Paul, than actual local police. They have flooded the zone. And that's going on. I know you're seeing it all over the Midas Touch Network, but I wanted to, as always here on Democracy, pull up the curtain a little bit and talk about the other attacks on democracy, the things that are going on. And I know it's been a weird 2 weeks, but you're not going to believe this. You guys are going to be shocked to find out it's only been 13 days since we invaded Venezuela, snatched the president, brought him home because of the drug war. And this ongoing, he's a drug star. We started blowing up boats in the ocean back in September because of the drugs. But then, okay, then today, you saw this very quietly on the news. Yeah. Just 13 days after taking down Maduro over the drug war, Trump has miraculously bought $500 million of Venezuelan oil and stashed it in a Qatari bank account. The guy next to him is the Emir of Qatar, who gave him a $1 billion aircraft. Why is the United States government storing money allegedly legally purchased at an offshore bank and not the United States Treasury? Why are we selling oil? The first $6 million of oil was sold to one of Trump's donors. You go the answer, folks. You know the answer already, because it doesn't have a damn thing to do with drugs at all. But I want to talk about that angle. And I got the greatest guest, as always. Once again, guests follow my lab, as you guys know, here on Democracy's FP Wellman. So we're going to get on with the show. I've got Dr. LeBaron join us from formerly the CDC. We're going to talk about this drug issue. We're going to talk about the CDC. We're talking what else is going on in America while everyone else is talking about the fighting in the streets of Minnesota. Because we have to talk about the dangers to our democracy, the dangers to our health. So it's a great time to do that. I'm thrilled to be here with you on Friday night. As you know, I am Fred Wellman. This is on Democracy FP Wellman every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, right here in the Midas Touch Live. Thanks for joining us. Let's go on the show. Welcome back. I am Fred Wellman, as I was 30 seconds ago. This is On Democracy FP Wellman. I'm so thrilled to be here with you guys on Friday night. As always, we're going to try and give you something to think about as you go into the weekend. It's not necessarily about the hottest news of the day, but it is news nonetheless. So I'm thrilled to have Dr. Charles LeBaron, the author of Greed to Do Good, the Untold Story of CDC's Disastrous War on Opioids. For more than 28 years, Dr. LeBaron worked as a medical epidemiologist at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and now he's written a book and about what's going on. We're going to talk about a lot. Dr. LeBaron, welcome to the show. It's bring him in, Satchel.
Thanks, friend.
Hey, sir, good to see you. We've been hanging out all morning. It's How's the weather in Atlanta?
It's cold. It's cold. Where's Shepard?
Same here. Same here in St. Louis. Let me tell you, I'm not loving it. So we're going to talk a lot about the Venezuela situation, the truth about our drug crisis. It has nothing to do with Venezuela, as I'm sure. We're not giving any secrets away to our audience beforehand. But I also wanted to start off talking about the CDC. Sir, you spent 28 years, a remarkable amount of time at the CDC. You live in Atlanta, where it's located. We all know that. It's fun. Does it bother you that most people know the CDC is in Atlanta because of The Walking Dead? I think most people learned that through a zombie show that you guys are right there in Atlanta. But, sir, it must be horrifying. I mean, you've been seeing it systematically dismantled for the last year. What are your thoughts as you look at what you did for 28 years or what's happening the last year there?
Well, apropos of that, it seems sometimes that CDC itself is the Walking Dead, because we've been basically so decimated that we're sort of just zombies right now, and we exist, but we don't really produce, and that's a difficulty. I think they'd like to put us out of our misery completely and put us under the ground, but it's been politically difficult to do that, so that we're allowed to exist in this silent zombie state recently.
And do you still talk to some of your colleagues there? Have people remained fighting the good fight?
All the time. The CDC has been basically devastated within the past year, lost about a third of its staff. We don't have a permanent director. The last time somebody attacked us, which was a couple months ago, with automatic weaponry and blasted out our windows, the only response of the head of HHS was he was on a fishing expedition and held up a fish. And that was his response about a dead fish, about what happened to us. So we don't feel really prized in many ways. And to the extent to which we're able to communicate, it's sometimes in whispers and sometimes through people like me who've retired and are able to speak.
Yeah, and it's, I'm a retired military officer. Yeah, I get it. We get those kind of whispers. I've got sources in the Pentagon that send me information all the time, and it's horrifying to me what they're being put through there. I can only imagine what your colleagues and the thing about the CDC is it reminds me of the military way. I've talked to people there. It is a calling. You and your colleagues went there because you believe in the mission. They're there because they believe in saving lives. It's got to be a very difficult situation for so many people who step up to serve our nation out there.
It certainly is, and the difficulty isn't just us. We're about 10,000 people who work there, but we're there to try and do something. and we're immobilized from doing something, the country is placed at risk. We're the front line against the biologic threats and other threats to the nation. And if we can't do it, there ain't nobody else to do it.
Yeah.
Now, it is important to note that drugs are the number one killer, overdoses are the number one killer of people between the age of 18 and 49. So we're talking about a threat to America, which is twice the level of either firearms or automobile disease. As a matter of fact, there are more overdoses than those two things combined. It's more important for fatality standpoint than breast cancer or prostate cancer. So we're the drug situation, the overdose drug situation, could well be designated public health hazard number one.
And so going into that, as we talk about the drug crisis and where we are as a nation with the drug crisis and how we're fighting it, that takes us back oddly. I know it's odd for you to be talking about foreign policy, right? I mean, Trump has said that we attacked Venezuela. We're blowing these boats to curtail the drug overdoses in the United States, that it's a clear and present danger. He actually declared it almost a national security threat, that fentanyl is actually a weapon of mass destruction, I believe he said, right? And the drugs but that's not, believe, as much as people are horrified by fentanyl and horrified by this idea, that's not really the crisis, the drug overdose crisis this nation is. The drug crisis isn't necessarily fentanyl at all, is
it? I think if you'd ask anybody who is involved in trying to do something about drugs and gave them a list of issues that should be addressed, I don't think they'd be able to find, after about 200 fine print pages, kidnap the dictator of Venezuela. I don't think anyone would have mentioned that. As a matter of fact, if you look, and I will present it, the BEA, the National Drug Threat Assessment, which was only published a few months ago under the Trump administration, the word Venezuela only appears twice in a paragraph that's about 10 sentences long. All the rest is around other issues. Venezuela would be the last place that you would think of that you would work on for drugs. To the extent to which it produces drugs, it's basically a transporter for cocaine to Europe. To the extent to which even any of that filters back to the United States is very, very little. For some reason, their logistics direct them at France more than California. And the total number of deaths that are attributable to stimulants, of which cocaine is one, along with methamphetamine and some legal stimulants like Ritalin and so forth, it accounts for about 15% of deaths. Most of the rest are from opioids. So basically, it's a non-player in the entire drug problem, which is a major problem. I can't overemphasize how big a problem drugs are. And I can't overemphasize or underemphasize how little Venezuela is a participant in that. So it comes as a gigantic surprise to see that we put the largest aircraft carrier in the Caribbean, supported by 10 other warships, 70 aircraft, 15,000 service people, and in order to address our drug problem via Venezuela. So this comes, we like enthusiasm around dealing with drug problems. This is the most misdirected effort at drug control that is possible to imagine.
I'd love to talk about that what you call the drug bust paradox. Let's take a short break for our great sponsor this week. take a break for the sponsor. We're going to come back and talk about the real truth about the drug and how you actually fight drugs, because you've been doing it for your entire career. So we'll be right back with our sponsor. Well, guys, it's 2026, and this is the year you launch your business, the year you transform into an entrepreneur, a founder, a boss. One powerful move puts your future firmly in your hands. You can start a business with Shopify. And look, maybe you got an idea you can't shake, a craft everyone tells you to sell. Maybe you waited because it seems impossible to set up. Maybe a story where you're designing your head exists out there. But with Shopify, 2026 is when you finally make it happen. Look, Shopify gives you everything you need to sell online and in person. Millions of entrepreneurs have already made this leap, from household names to first-time business owners just getting started. My daughter's business is run on Shopify and has been for over a decade, I think, or years now. Shopify gives you all the tools to easily build your dream store. Choose from hundreds of beautiful templates. You can customize, you can match them to your brand. It's fast with Shopify's built-in AI tools now. They write product descriptions, headlines, help you edit product photos. Marketing is built into emails, social media campaigns, everything that reaches customers to help you sell. It's right in there. As you grow, Shopify grows with you. You can handle more orders, expand to new markets, and do it all from the same dashboard you started with. Look, 2026, stop waiting and start selling with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Fred. That's shopify.com/Fred. One more time so you don't miss it, okay? That's shopify.com/Fred. And you know what? Maybe you're going to hear your very first New Year with Shopify by your side. Thanks for sponsoring the show, Shopify. Good luck out there. Get to work, folks. And we're back. And so one of the things you've mentioned, I know in the book and in your work, is and I've talked about it a lot too, is, the drug problem in America is it's like any other economic thing, right? There's a supply side, there's a demand side, right? And so it seems we've actually built, it's shocking to me, we've literally built a foreign policy, right? And this is important because before we go into it, is Trump literally, there was in the middle of all the chaos is going on everywhere, as you know, in Minnesota and everywhere else. But that's masking a lot of really bad stuff. And it came out, I think yesterday or the day before, he actually is threatening the president of Mexico now, that he wants to send U.S. troops into Mexico to fight the cartels, because the cartels are sending drugs. I mean, again and again, our foreign policy now seems to be focused on the idea, I would say, our foreign policy is actually about taking over countries and their resources, but they're masking it under this drug war, right? It seems like the drug war is really a mask for something else. But talk about that drug bust paradox, right? The supply side interventions don't actually fight this, do they? I mean, the addiction issue we have is is the real issue, isn't it?
Yeah, we have a severe drug problem in the United States, and I think you can tell that I'm not underestimated. The question is what you do about it, and as you're pointing out, the two ways to go about it, which need to be done and which need to be complementary. One is dealing with the supply, which is largely illicit drugs coming in to the United States, and the other is to dealing with the demand. In the absence of a demand, those drugs aren't going to come in because the people who are supplying are capitalists. They want some money. And no one is going to weep a lot of tears over people being incarcerated who are involved in that. No one's wept any tears over Maduro being incarcerated in a Brooklyn jail. But what did that do to our drug problem? It isn't clear at all. We have captured El Chapo, for instance, but is it clear that capturing El Chapo alone is going to do something about it? No. In the presence of demand, there is always going to be somebody who's going to supply that demand in some fashion. And going after the cartels is a good idea. They're bad guys. No one's going to weep over any of the cartel guys dying. But as long as the demand continues to exist, there's going to be somebody else taking their place. I mean, you're trying to create a prohibition situation. And if there's a demand for alcohol, it'll be met by even worse guys at some point. Where the data are clear, and this is what you've alluded to in the drug bust paradox, the studies have been done, and these more on a local level, what happens when you bust the local supplier? Actually, overdoses go up. The reason for that appears to be that people find local suppliers who are reliable in providing high quality illicit drugs, and they are legal, and they have a good rep, put it that way. What happens if you knock those guys off? People become desperate, and there's really nothing like there's two very, very strong motivators in life. One is addiction, very inflexible demand. Two is a lot of pain. And if you for which opioids are needed in many cases, if you interrupt the supply to those folks, they will go searching in a dedicated fashion for some supply somewhere. And it appears that what happens when you bust their regular source, they go to much more dangerous sources and then overdose. So that in fact, these drug busts, which create a lot of publicity, and the people who are busted are usually not very pleasant characters, don't in fact, that doesn't do anything to the overdose rate other than increase it. So until you work the demand side of treatment and prevention, you're just going to continue to have the same problem you had, no matter how many high profile you can show Maduro coming through in handcuffs and saying Happy New Year to people, or El Chapo looking a little bit disgruntled when he discovered he was in U.S. territory. Those are nice media events, but they don't do anything. And, when you work at CDC, you're supposed to do something about the disease, you're outcome oriented. And the outcomes are worse when you do the things that are involve only supply.
And so I'd like to talk about that. I mean, that brings us right back to the Trump administration, right? And RFK Jr. and what they're doing to your old former organization and the attacks on science. So my understanding is that budget cuts have absolutely devastated the substance abuse and mental health services agency. States were cut off from almost $2 million in block grants, $350 million in addiction overdose funding. I mean, there's been a direct and resolute attack on the very organization that was dealing with that supply side, right? I mean, the science-backed organization that was trying to deal with the addictions of our country has been almost decimated, hasn't it?
Yeah, the thing that was really remarkable in the midst of this extraordinarily high profile, very expensive operation, it's said to be about drugs against a country that is a minuscule player in the entire environment. At the same time, it was almost like it was trying to be snuck through under the cover of the thing. The three operations that are really responsible for doing something about the demand were decimated. The agency that handles substance abuse and mental health suddenly got its budget completely zapped, and ditto to a great extent for the National Institute for Drug Abuse, which is part of the NIH. That was going to be abolished completely. And as a matter of fact, the hunk of CDC that deals with drug abuse, that is the Division of Overdose Prevention, is scheduled to be abolished completely.
What's the reasoning there? I don't understand. Look, I know he hates vaccines. I know they hate mental health. Do you have any idea what their insane reasoning is behind these attacks on something like that?
I think you're giving them too much credit for the reason. I've heard, which, this is one of these things where we need some of the people who have worked out quarks and everything to figure out what the reasoning is. And part of the reason this reasoning is so hard to figure out is that no one ever announces anything about why or who. There's nobody responsible things just happen. People at CDC, for instance, they're suddenly told their jobs are eliminated. And then 2 weeks later, their jobs are replaced. And then they're eliminated again. And no one knows what's going on. There's no director of CDC, no permanent director of CDC. The actions that are taken against Samson, the drug abuse agency, there's no one who took responsibility. There's no announcement. It just suddenly letters went out to all these states saying your money is stopped right now. Yeah,
Yeah, we just got notice of that last night here in St. Louis. The local news opened up last night. The fact that 2 of our drug overdose protections and drug abuse prevention nonprofits just had their grants cut off and no announcement. And what was fascinating to me and disheartening to me, Doctor, was our local news organization. They're fine. We have great local news organizations. Actually, I know them all. They couldn't even pin it on who did it. Now that we're talking today, sir, it makes more sense to me. Throughout the whole story, it was just like this mysterious thing that happened, that their grants just disappeared. And you're literally saying that's because no one actually told them why or has announced it, have they? I mean, it is no shit of mystery, isn't it?
There's no who and there's no why. I mean, it's very curious. Usually what you like in an organization is that someone is the proponent of a strategy, told what the strategy is and what the desired outcome is. It isn't clear what the outcome is. It isn't clear what the person is who's proponent. It isn't clear what the strategy is. All you know is that something happened, and is the bizarrest kind of situation. And what was interesting is, of course, howls arose from the various organizations that cut off in all the red states, and they complained like crazy to their politicians. And basically, several days later, they reversed it with no explanation. And no one said who reversed it. No one said why they reversed it. No one said, well, we'll go back to cutting you back 2 weeks from now when the dust settles. No one knows. And so it's kind of the night and fog kind of situation. And one of the difficulties with night and fog is no one can make any plans.
No.
You don't know whether 2 weeks from now you're going to have a job. Who's going to start thinking through how do we deal with this situation? So it just immobilizes. Even if when you restore the cuts, everybody's immobilized from doing anything.
It's just chaos. And I guess I do want to get, where's Congress in all this? I mean, I always go back to that right now. I joke here a lot that Missouri's own, Harry Truman, 1949, talked about his Republican do nothing Congress. And I talk about how I've got the Republican doormat Congress. This is their job. There is a Health and Human Services Committee. There are members of Congress who should be providing oversight. It feels like there's just been a complete just walking away from their duties. There's no oversight occurring. I mean, have we even heard any howls from Congress about this insanity at all? Or has the Republican Congress absolutely squashed all this discussion already?
It's a complicated issue. To a great extent, the Democrats have complained about
Yeah.
what's going on. There isn't a lack of complaints, but the problem is it's in a situation where it's very hard to, in a sense, have any screen time about the thing. If you have Minnesota going on, you have this pseudo event in Venezuela going on, you have aircraft carriers being moved into the Persian Gulf, to apparently we're going to do something there. You have Greenland happening. There's people say, the fact that, as a matter of fact, it provides an excellent cover and doing things like completely slashing everything to do with dealing with the drug demand problem. I will want to make one comment, just pure economics. You think economics would be a controlling event in this situation. If you took the combined budgets SAMHSA, the drug addiction thing, the National Institute for Drug Abuse, and the Division of Overdose Prevention, the combined budget, they're less than the cost of building one aircraft carrier. They're less than 0.1% of the federal budget. You eliminate all that, you've done nothing to the deficit. You've had no effect whatsoever on the balance of trying to, which I believe is a realistic issue. Our deficits that like climate change is slowly grinding thing that'll help us. You do nothing to help that. So all these cuts under, no one ever mentions fiscal responsibility. Again, we all know why they're making the cuts. They have no effect whatsoever on the deficit. So we're losing ground with no benefit economically or public health standpoint.
It's disheartening, and I'm glad we're able to talk about it here on the show and talk about this is because that is it. It is what Steve Bannon predicted or promised right years ago. Flood the zone with bullshit, right? It's a constant flood of chaos and insanity. So trying to peel back the onion a little bit and find out what's going on underneath the layers is tougher and tougher. And so folks like you have worked so hard to try and make a difference, and is having your life's work kind of undermined and dismissed is got to be shocking. I'm sure. I'm sorry to hear that. I guess, we could go on all day and start talking about this. I guess, yeah, you did write a book about this, right? Yeah, you wrote a book about the opioid crisis. A lot of us saw the mini series about the insanity, the selling the opioids, OxyContin and everything else. I mean, there's a lot out there. Tell us a little bit about your book and where people can find out more information about your work.
Well, I'm happy to hold up my book.
There we go. Hold it up.
There we go. So people know what it's about. And to a great extent, the thing that's of interest to people is that I believe that public health is something that is independent of politics. So that, in fact, I criticize the daylights out of my home agency, CDC, for the errors it's made around drugs. That is not a problem because I believe it's the mission that we should be focusing on. And strategies sometimes fail. And the strategy that failed to some extent at CDC, which I detail, was another supply side that decided correctly that there was a lot of problems with people becoming addicted through prescription opioids. And of course, we're well aware of the shacklers promoting that and overuse. So in a sense, what CDC said, well, if that's a problem, let's go after it. And it did an enormous crunch on prescription opioids to prevent them from being overused, but they overshot. And it became a little bit like the drug bust paradox. In fact, what happened as a result of draconian rules around prescription meds, we actually had an explosion of overdoses because people who had pain and needed to get did the same thing that addicts do when their connection is busted. Since they couldn't get it from their physicians, they went to the street, and we had an explosion. So, in a sense, it's the same story over and over again, but sometimes conducted by well-meaning people, which I would consider CDC to be a well-meaning thing, but had a well-meaning policy that didn't work. And I thought I should detail that. But at the same time, we have I don't know what meaning policy we have now because no one explains what our policy is, but whatever it is, we're going south. And we know what the effects are if you cut out any support for people who have addiction and try and get them going in the right direction. And then just have basically empty spectacles of large armadas going into the Caribbean. And who knows what the cost of all that was. And we end up with 2 additional people in a Brooklyn jail. That was the output of this entire event. And then you'll hear a thing more about drugs from, you hear a lot about oil. Raising the question, was this ever about drugs?
No.
And there are a lot of smart people in the Pentagon, a lot of smart people in thing, and they may have created a smokescreen about drugs, but somehow the suspicion when you see what's going on in the current negotiations, boy, oil seems to come up. I haven't heard a peep anymore about
funny thing about that in it. Well, sir, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. It's eye-opening, and I like to take this show and make sure we're talking about issues that aren't being the number one in the news right now. I appreciate your time, sir. Appreciate your life's work. I'm glad you're still fighting for your colleagues at CDC. We do need to hear about what they're going through, because it is life and death for so many Americans, much more so than what's happening in Venezuela or sometimes other places. So thanks for everything. Thanks for joining us today. As always, they can find the book online and in stores, right, sir?
sure.
That's it. Easy peasy. Has agreed to do good. Thank you, doctor. I appreciate you joining us today. We'll see you again soon. Thank you. Oof. Okay, so that's the point of the show, folks. To talk about the issues maybe you're not hearing. We want to talk about the issues as this flood of bullshit's hitting us, as Steve Bannon predicted, as he came into our lives, and this is what we're seeing. You always have to think, with this Trump administration, with the Republican Congress, what are they not doing? What are they not watching? What are they not participating in? And it is as much the silence. And that's the challenge for many of us. For any of us who are fighting against these issues, is we also have to look at what's not being said. In this case, what's not being said is any reasoning of why RFK Jr. has taken a blowtorch to our science, our entire framework of science and public health. And so it's people like Dr. LeBaron who are out here, who's retired. I'm sure he'd rather be laying on a beach in Florida than still fighting to save his old organization. And yet here he is on this show on a Friday night with you about saving his old organization. But it really is, and I'm going to leave with this last thought before I let you go, because I know a lot of you guys have things to do. It's this thought. It's the thought that Dr. LeBaron brought up last. It's never been about drugs, okay? It's never been about curtailing drugs. They killed people in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. They killed people in the Pacific as a pretense to invade a country and take the oil and sell it. I don't think I made any clearer than that. And Congress has done nothing. Today, we had a story come out, or yesterday, a story from ProPublica saying that Donald Trump Jr. has been added to the boards of 3 or 4 companies who've, right before the election or after the election, all of those companies have gotten government contracts, lucrative sales. The corruption of this administration is rampant, and everything else in a lot of ways is just a smokescreen. And where is Congress? Where is the Republican doormat Congress? My God, James Comey was up in arms about the one Ukrainian board that Hunter Biden joined. They've been investigating it for 6 years, okay, even longer. All the Hunter Biden stuff. And now we find out yesterday that Don Jr. is on 3 or 4 boards. What does Don Jr. know the fuck about UAVs? Nothing. But the company he joined got a big contract from Pete Hegseth. That's the truth. The corruption is rampant. We have to address it. You need to go into the midterms holding your Congress member or your candidates accountable to address the corruption of the Trump administration. Why are they destroying? Why are they destroying the CDC? Why are they destroying our public health? Why are they undermining the organizations that are helping people stay healthy? Why is Brooke Rollins thinking we should eat a meal for $3? It's corruption. All of it is a layer of corruption from a gangster administration. So as we go into the midterms, as you know, it's a midterm year, ask those questions. When you go to town halls, if your Republican holds ones, but they don't because they're scared of you. But as you go forward, keep in mind, what are we doing about the corruption? Why is Congress not conducting oversight of this administration? Why has Congress walked away from their Article 1 duty in the Constitution? And don't let any son of a bitch tell you they're a strict constitutionalist and then ignore the Constitution's Article 1 powers. So with that, fight, keep fighting, stay safe. Don't give them pretense to attack us. Don't give them pretense to conduct more raids. Use your voices, be loud, and vote. Help your local Democratic candidate, whoever they may be. As always, you can find us on Substack. That's fpwellman.substack.com. That's where all the latest information is being posted for this work and the work I do elsewhere. We'd love to have you follow us at fpwellman.substack.com. Really easy to find. You can't miss it. fp1.substack.com is where you can stay. Because in the meantime, we're here every Friday night at 7 p.m. right live on the Midas Touch Network. I appreciate you guys being here as always. We're also kicking in, doing new hot seat interviews with candidates for Congress and other candidates across the country. So make sure you look out for those. They'll be posted periodically on the Midas Touch Network as well, because it is the midterm year. We're ready to kick it back in again, talking about who you need to be supported and who you need to be elected. With that, I'm Fred Wellman. This is On Democracy. We'll see you guys again next week. Thanks for joining us.